So moved,
So
Chinya.
moved, Brooks.
Thank you, Commissioner Chinya. Is there a second?
Second,
Commissioner Brooks, is that? Yep, Commissioner Brooks. Thank you. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Chinya?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Horvitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
I'm also in favor. That motion passes. Commissioner Chinya will now read the moment of silence.
We would like to take time to recognize the passing of city school students. They will be remembered fondly by the greater city school community. And tonight, we send our deepest condolences to their families and friends. Jarek Mitchie was a 12th grade student at Achievement Academy. He excelled in mathematics and was working hard towards graduating this June. His teachers loved him, and he had made positive connections with everyone at school. Jarek will be greatly missed by his family, friends, and the community at Achievement Academy. Robert Davenport was a very determined student. He attended school daily, even with all of the challenges that he encountered. He loved art, sensory materials, and looked forward to his physical education classes. Robert would have graduated in June. He will be missed by his peers and the whole Claremont 307 family. Please join me in a moment of silence remembering these two students from city schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Emeritus. It's always a challenge to hear or to take that moment. So to the families, if you all are listening, those young people are certainly in our hearts, and you all are in our thoughts and our prayers. Is there a motion to approve the prior open session minutes?
So moved, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Is there a second?
Second, Sally.
Thank you, Commissioner Sally. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Chinya?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Horvitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
I'm in favor. That's 7 in favor with 3 absent. That motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the closed session summaries?
So moved, Brooks.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Is there a second?
Second, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Chinya?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts? Excuse me, Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
I'm also in favor. That's 6 in favor with 3 absent. That motion passes. Thank you. So good evening again, everyone. Last week, the district celebrated Teachers Appreciation Week. Woo! Parents, students, and staff from all parts of the city joined together to honor teachers for their commitment to their students' well-being. In addition to the celebration, drum roll please, the district announced Duenni. I want to make sure that I'm pronouncing our star teacher's name. One of our star teachers, Dooney, Burrell Dooney, who is a pre-K teacher at Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle School, as the winner of the 2022 City Schools Teacher of the Year Award. The board would like to congratulate Burrell and extend our gratitude to all city schools teachers. Your ability to connect to students and families with passion, flexibility, and grace shows us how deeply invested you are in teaching and in nurturing. The work you do is not easy. Still, you push forward, pouring your energy, your love, your knowledge into your students each and every day. Thank you all. Thank you to our teachers. May is also celebrating Fine Arts in City Schools Month, where fine arts events will happen in city schools and the district office all month long. Each week, the Guilford Gallery will host visual art exhibitions from schools with arts designations. As we came into the building today, actually, we saw an installation of a school of some young people that were putting up some artwork in our hallway today. A gallery reception for these school families and community members will be each Thursday this month from 4 to 8 p.m. The main foyer of district office will also host performances all month. For more information, see our website, Baltimore City Public Schools finearts.org. As the district continues its efforts to support its teachers and students, tonight's meeting will address updates in the Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine City Schools Recovery Plan. The recovery plan aligns with the board's strategic priorities and strengthens our communication with the public so that all of us remain involved and heard. To interact and to engage more with our parents, we will host a Spring Board Parent and Family Forum this Thursday, May 12th, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 here at the Baltimore City Public Schools District Office. Parents can talk about important topics like advocating for your child, parent and family rights and responsibilities, school-based governance, and more. Most importantly, we'll be able to hear from the district about how we can better support you and your child. Get your voice heard by sharing what is on your mind. See you all Thursday. Thank you all. I'll now acknowledge some of the gifts and donations City Schools has received. Thank you to our donors and supporters for your generous support. A donation of $4,200 in materials for the Wellness and Mindfulness Space project from the Heart of the Schools Fund on behalf of Heart of the Schools and Fund for Educational Excellence for Leith Walk Elementary Middle School. Thank you all. Thank you to the fund and thank you to Heart of Schools. Is there a motion to approve the Personnel, Employment, and Payroll Report? Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Is there a second?
Second, Sally.
Thank you, Commissioner Sally. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Chenya?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
I'm in favor. That is 6 in favor with 3 absent. That motion passes. I will now turn it over to Dr. Santelises for CEO comments.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair McFadden. It is great to be with everyone this evening. We are going to get started with tonight's PEP, and I am going to invite our acting Chief Human Capital Officer, Sarah Deal, forward with this evening's PEP. Hello, Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. It's May, and so our PEP reports are getting a little bit longer, so let's jump in. It is recommended that Bridget Cotman, currently Assistant Principal, Fort Worthington Elementary, be appointed Principal, City Neighbors Charter Elementary Middle, effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Bryn Toops, currently Teacher Secondary at City Neighbors High School, be appointed Assistant Principal, City Neighbors Charter Elementary Middle, effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Danielle Smith, currently Ed Associate, National Academy Foundation, be appointed Assistant Principal at Walter P. Carter Elementary Middle, effective July 1st, 2022. It's recommended that Leslie Logan, currently Educational Associate at Leith Walk Elementary, be appointed Assistant Principal at Leith Walk Elementary, effective July 1st, 2022. It is also recommended that Malcolm Rowe, currently Teacher Secondary at P-Tech at Dunbar, be appointed Assistant Principal Hazelwood Elementary Middle, effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Matthew Edelberg, currently Teacher Secondary at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, be appointed Assistant Principal at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Michael Lucas, currently Educational Associate at Hampstead Hill Academy, be appointed Assistant Principal at Hampstead Hill Academy, effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Rashida Ford, currently interim principal at Booker T. Washington Middle, be appointed principal at Booker T. Washington Middle effective May 11th, 2022. It is recommended that Richard Kennedy, currently principal resident at Baltimore City College High, be appointed assistant principal at Baltimore City College High effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Shikia Barron, currently educational associate at the historic Cherry Hill Elementary Middle, be appointed assistant principal at the historic Cherry Hill Elementary Middle effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Shamel Carter, currently teacher elementary at Baltimore Leader School for Young Women, be appointed assistant principal at Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women effective July 1st, 2022. It is recommended that Shakura Eubanks, currently teacher elementary at Leithwalk Elementary, be appointed assistant principal at Leithwalk Elementary effective July 1st, 2022. And finally, it is recommended that Juan Paz, currently assistant principal at Hampstead Hill Academy Elementary Middle, be reassigned to assistant principal at Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle effective July 1st, 2022. Congratulations, Dr. Santelises.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Congratulations to everyone on tonight's PEP agenda. It is also my pleasure to spotlight some of the folks who have been appointed in the principalship, as has become our practice over the last number of years. So Rashida Ford is continuing her school leadership journey in city schools. As we heard tonight, she is now officially the principal at Booker T. Washington Middle School for the Arts. Previously, she served as the assistant principal of the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women. As a true believer in the power of servant leadership, Ms. Ford believes, quote, schools thrive where community exists, and community can only be cultivated by those who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education from Morgan State University and a Master of Arts in Educational Leadership from Loyola University of Maryland. Congratulations, Principal Ford.
Dr. Santelises, are they able, if they're with us, to come on screen while you are?
Oh, thank you. No, absolutely. And I thank you for doing that, Vice Chair McFadden, because I should have noted it.
Okay, there they go.
Oh, see, he was looking out for you, Principal Ford. He knew you were there. Go ahead and say hello to the crowd. You want to at least say hello?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Santelises, for the honor. It's a pleasure to serve the Booker T. Washington community. We truly are on a rise and we're ready to do the work. Thank you so much.
Thank you and congratulations.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. Next, we have Bridget Cotman, and if you are online, you can certainly come forward as well. And she has most recently served as an assistant principal with city schools. Prior to serving in this role, she has worked in the capacity of a special educator, IEP chair, and educational associate. Her passion for children and their advancement leads her on her journey as an educator. Ms. Cotman's mantra is, each one, teach one, in effort to build generational greatness. She holds a bachelor's degree from Morgan State University and a master's degree in special education from Goucher College, with her formal administration training from the Emerging Leaders Program under the umbrella of New Leaders. Ms. Cotman, are you with us? And if not, we send you congratulations just the same. Congratulations to you both. And now, as Commissioner McFadden announced earlier, I had the pleasure of being able to announce this year's Teacher of the Year. It really is one, if not my favorite day, one of the top 2 days that I enjoy every year, and it's a privilege that I take very seriously as the CEO of City Schools. I do want to say, and this is huge kudos to Sharonda Ely, our past Teachers of the Year, Kier Butts and LaQuisha Hall, who served on, and Wyatt, I believe as well, Oki, who served on the committee. And I will say, when you have excellent educators selecting other excellent educators, it makes my job 100 times harder. This year's field was one of the deepest that I've seen in my 6 years in city schools. And even though it made my life incredibly hard, it made it all the more sweet today when I had the pleasure of surprising our 2022 Teacher of the Year, Ms. Beryl Dudney. As Commissioner McFadden noted, she's a pre-K teacher at Commodore John Rogers Middle School. Ms. Dudney is a team lead at Commodore John Rogers, a city schools model teacher, and a kindergarten readiness consultant, as well as a Tools of the Mind endorsed curriculum and instructional coach across the district. Outside of city schools, Ms. Dudney is a Sue Lehman Excellence in Teaching Award regional finalist, a Kennedy Leadership Award winner. She serves as Charm Magazine Advisory Board member and is a One Book Baltimore committee member. As Kier Butts, our 2000 Teacher of the Year, I think said it best, she's got the energy and the passion. Her message is uplifting and student-centered. And I will just say that one of the things that struck me both today as well as during her interview with me with Ms. Dudney, she could not stop talking about the genius and the power of her students. You would never know with her energy that she, like all of us, has lived through 2 years of some of the most challenging ever in education. And she has what I affectionately but very seriously call receipts with students. She gets actual results. She had some of her young people sharing their work with reporters in the room today. And we are just so proud that yet again, city schools is showing up strong. We have an incredibly strong track record at the state level and even state going to national level. So congratulations. Well-deserved honor. Shout out to the Commodore John Rogers School community who was clearly thrilled for her as well today. And then my pleasant day continued because I had the opportunity and really had the honor, I would say, to celebrate the graduation of 83 young people from our Reengagement program who have overcome adversity to complete their graduation requirements. The ceremony was held at Dorothy I. Height, and the theme was, I Believe. It's really difficult for me to just express just the pride that I felt to be in the presence and have the opportunity to share with these young men and women who had already demonstrated through their determination, their tenacity, their ability to persevere over fear. And I had a chance to share with them that it doesn't matter how you're dressed, what degrees you have, how you might look. The reality is everyone is confronted with whisperings of fear when they're encountering something new, but that they had already passed the biggest test in that they were sitting there, which means that when that whisper of fear and doubt came, they answered with, I can do this, I will do this, and it really was a wonderful time to be there. I also want to note we have an additional 24 potential summer graduates from the Reengagement program, who I look forward to celebrating in the months ahead. And I do just want to say, give a special thanks to Roger Shaw, the entire Reengagement staff, again, whose belief and support made today possible. And in a time where a lot of folks like to use words to say they're about student voice and student engagement and students are the center, Mr. Shaw and the Reengagement team actually put their money where their words are. And they hit the ground, they go in the back corners of this city where so many people won't go. They don't sit on comfortable Zoom calls. They actually get up and work with families and young people, and the fruit of their labor was seen today. So I want to give a big shout out to the full Reengagement team for all of the work that you do and for showing with your actions, not just your words, that you care and believe in our young people. And then finally, in recent weeks, or I thought it was finally, but maybe not, in recent weeks, our schools have experienced an uptick in positive COVID results due to the spread of the BA2 COVID variant. It's important to realize that we have never stopped our asymptomatic testing, as many other districts did throughout the state as well as the country, and we are much better prepared than we have ever been. Our health and safety coordinators are ready, and the COVID response team is monitoring positivity levels and close contacts. We continue to implement test to stay and are enforcing masking for all close contacts and any classrooms with 3 or more linked cases. We have also implemented additional testing in preparation for any overnight or out-of-state field trips to ensure that students can continue to enjoy these really important opportunities. We will keep you informed of any further developments, but at this time, we really are remaining focused on minimizing, keeping our school environment safe and minimizing any further disruptions to learning. As always, I strongly encourage everyone to get vaccinated and boosted. It really is the best way to keep you and your family safe. Earlier this afternoon, Dr. Zaraza, Commissioner of Health for Baltimore City, recommended wearing a mask in indoor public spaces. We recommend, but do not require, that people follow the recommendation of the Baltimore City Health Department. And now, finally, I'd like to announce that we are extending the City Schools United Way fundraising campaign through Friday, May 27th. United Way of Central Maryland has been an invaluable source of support for thousands of families in Baltimore City, providing a wide range of services to those in need. The United Way City Schools fundraising drive is our chance to help them help others. And I encourage everyone to contribute wherever and whatever you can. It's easy to give, and your contribution will go a long way in supporting families in need. City Schools employees have always been generous, and I really do hope that we all take advantage of the extended deadline. This concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you, Vice Chair McFadden. I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. Board colleagues, we are actually ahead of schedule. What we're going to do is move to item 9.01. Okay. So are we ready for the annual review presentation? Can we move with that? Okay. Yes. Hey, Ms. Alvarez, I saw you up. We're going to move forward with that. We'll now hear.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives. And I'm going to be presenting a recommendation on a subdivision of a parcel of land and surplusing of that land back to the city of Baltimore. Next slide. This particular recommendation is aligned to Board Priority 5, where city schools will provide equal access to district services, resources, and facilities to ensure the success of students, staff, and the surrounding community. It's also aligned to our goals around major changes like this, that every student receive a high quality educational experience that supports their learning and their personal growth, that puts them on the path to graduate from our high schools with the skills, knowledge, and understanding to succeed in college, careers, and wherever their dreams may take them. So we're presenting it tonight for the public for information, so that members of the public are aware of this. We will be holding a virtual community meeting on Wednesday, May 18th. If you're interested in participating in this meeting, a link can be found on the district website on the calendar for that date, and the board is anticipated to vote on June 14th. And so this recommendation is related to City Springs Elementary Middle School, which is located in Southeast Baltimore on Caroline Street. Principal Rhonda Vaquetta is the school leader. It is a neighborhood charter school operated by the Baltimore Curriculum Project. And it's in Community Learning Network 11. So some of the background on why we're bringing forward this recommendation, which is has like good news. On July 6, 2018, the Housing Authority of Baltimore City and the City of Baltimore were awarded a $30 million grant to carry out the Perkins Somerset Old Town Transformation Plan. As part of this plan, in partnership with the city, the City Springs building, its current building, will be rebuilt at the site of the Lombard campus, which is directly across the street from City Springs, with funds from state and city sources. And so as part of this, the first step in this plan is we need to surplus a portion of the land that is located next to the City Springs Elementary Middle School building in order to meet some of those requirements. Next slide. We did have a meeting with school staff that shared some of their concerns around just, how to deal with construction, because that will be, happening soon at the school, how to make sure that we address the field space, which is at the heart of this recommendation, needs, and how important outdoor space is to the school community. The school uses its athletics fields quite regularly as part of their program. They have a strong athletics program, and it's part of the SEL within the school. And so one of the things that's important to us in this work is ensuring that they can use the field space for as long as possible, and that we have an alternative space for them to use during the construction. The construction is anticipated to take about 2 to 3 years. So this is a picture of the property. And so you can see the building where you see the yellow. That's the part that will be retained, the building and its parking lot. What we're recommending to be surplus and subdivided and given back to the city is the field space that you see denoted by the red line that's surrounding the field space. And then this is the spaces that are directly across from this school site. So City Springs Park, what you see donated with the green line, will be where the school, if this is approved, that will be the field space that will be used by the school community during the construction phase. And then the yellow property where Lombard Middle Building and that entire school property is located is where the new City Springs Elementary Middle Building and its fields, new fields, will be built at the end of this project. This just shows you, where the students live in relationship to the facility. As part of this, we are entering an MOU between us as city schools with the City of Baltimore and the Housing Authority of Baltimore to ensure that we can meet some of those needs, some of those concerns that are addressed, that I shared to you from the school community. One of those key concerns is ensuring that City Springs can use the field for as long as possible. until construction is set to begin, and that City Springs will have priority use of the City Springs Park as the field when the surplus takes effect. So if the board approves this, when they're no longer able to use the football field, then their use would switch to the City Springs Park, and that they would have priority use. We're asking the board to approve the subdivision and the surplus of the City Springs Elementary Middle Field for it to take effect no sooner than December 2022, contingent on this executed MOU that is described on that I just described. This is important. This is part of how we get to getting a brand new City Springs Elementary Middle School. One of the big things that we've been working for, advocating for, and aligning is to get more of our students into new facilities, out of old facilities that don't support learning in the best way, into newer facilities are more able to do that. And so this action brings us closer to that. We're anticipating that City Springs will be in their new facility in 2025. Any questions?
Are there any questions for our speakers? I don't see any hands virtually. Just given that wait time. Thank you, Ms. Alvarez.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
We're going to are there any members from our recognized groups that are present? If you are present, can you turn your camera on? We're going to move ahead, colleagues, with item 9.01. And 9.01 is our presentation on the Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine, the recovery plan for the city schools update. We're going to begin with that. And from there, we'll move into our public comment for this evening. So, Dr. Santos.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. This update this evening is connected to what we promised the community, the board, and all stakeholders as an update with our recovery plan that we affectionately call R3, but it represents Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine. I do want to just remind everyone that we have not, this is not kind of supplanted our blueprint. We still have that focus. This is the extension as well as our way of responding to what we know is needed for young people coming out of unprecedented challenge. I am very grateful to staff, both at the school level as well as at the district office, who have worked on tonight's update. I will remind all of them to please keep your presentations succinct so that we do actually have time for our board to respond. So I'm going to say that one more time because I too can be verbose. I'm going to ask the team to provide a succinct overview so that our cabinet, so that our board actually has time and space to ask questions. And so with that, I will turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises, and good evening, school board commissioners. This is Tina Hike-Hubbard, Chief of Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment for Baltimore City Public Schools. I'll be doing the first part of our presentation. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. I will start out, and then I will invite Chief John Davis, and then Chief Dabrowski, John Dabrowski, to join me as well for later in the presentation. So quickly, we're going to go with some framing, stakeholder engagement, and our plan update. So here's our preconditions as a reminder, our health and safety and connectivity, and then overarching commitments I will cover around student voice, family, community engagement, equity. I'll then bring in Chief Dabrowski and Chief Davis to talk about professional learning and all of our key strategies on the Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine plan. Next slide, please. As you remember, we have aligned with all of our board priorities. And so you can see here where the preconditions, the overarching commitments, and the key strategies are aligned to board priorities, which are also in the gray on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. So stakeholder engagement is my favorite topic. I've been with you before to talk about this. So just quickly, I want to show you that we completed our BRY, of 21-22. We are now getting ready for our EOY, something we've already started. You can see the goals. I've had board members ask us before, how did we get to our numbers, right? And we've looked at what we were able to accomplish in EOY last year, BOY this year for beginning of school year. And that's where we've set our goals. You see, we have very lofty goals for how we want to get more students, more teachers, more school leaders, more families, et cetera, engaged in our surveying process. So our goal is to hit about 44,000 unique responses to our surveys. At the bottom of the slide, you can see students launched May 2nd. We have school bus educators launching May 8th. School leaders will be in June. Families, et cetera, have already launched. District office staff and school-based support staff will come back later in the summer and share the outcomes of all those surveys later on. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, the stakeholder engagement is also feedback and engagement. Talk about feedback on our surveys, and this is engagement. Just to give you an example, and you can read the slide clearly, but just to give examples of the kinds of engagement that we're doing, like family festivals or STAT with principals and school leaders or teachers advisories. There are different ways that we are engaging with our stakeholders beyond just collecting their feedback throughout the year. Next slide, please. One additional note, we had a POSIP survey that took place during the school year, well, 2 of them. POSIP, again, are our texting platform surveys that we have that allow us to get very quick response on questions that the district has. So in the first one, we did budget. We asked the district to families to prioritize what are your top 2 priorities for the budget. Every single school got one of these surveys for their own school community to understand what their schools the families of their schools wanted. And we also aggregated all the results, and then we have the district priorities. We see here the number 1 priority was tutoring, and the second was mental health support. So these kind of things are helping us inform how we presented budget to you in the last few meetings. Our second POSIP poll was on the school calendar. I just want to highlight here, the number 1 response from families on this one was fewer early release days at 24%. But right next to that is more parent and teacher conference days at 19%. Those half days are actually part of the way we're able to deliver those parent teacher conferences. And I will also just acknowledge that we also surveyed our teachers in our PD and our advisory sessions, and they really appreciate the half-day sessions, right? And on the wellness for them, as well as ability to plan or get PD. And so we do have to balance the multitude of stakeholder engagements that we get into what's the best response for everybody. And it might not be we please every single group all the time. So what's the compromise? What works best for everybody else? I just wanted to acknowledge that piece. Next slide, please. Now we're going to go into the plan update. So just quickly, our preconditions. The first one is our health and safety and COVID response. Here's some quotes as you see from principals and how that's been going for them. I just want to flag our testing efforts are still going on. Our Test to Stay program has been fantastic. And when we had spring break recently, we did have, we sent at-home tests for our staff and our students, 2 apiece, before they came back from spring break, to make sure that we were supporting the contact tracing process and providing students the best and safe, and staff the best safe return back to school. Next slide, please. And our updates on our facility improvements. We are excited to say that we have 21 health suite upgrades. We have 27 schools in design for school bathroom renovations, which is amazing. We have $2.5 million for critical HVAC repairs. And we also have $2.28 million for HCAP capital projects for window and door replacements. So we're really excited about the progress we're making on the facilities improvements. Next slide, please. And on connectivity and technology, again, as everyone knows, we have been supporting hotspots and laptops for our students. We are now working to get our seniors to return their devices back to us. We can actually put those devices back into circulation. When we give students devices, they are theirs to use for that time period, and when they graduate, we want them back. So as a reminder, if any parents of seniors are listening, or seniors themselves, to please encourage them to bring back their devices. But we're going to continue to provide or get closer to that one-to-one strategy for devices for all of our students. And we'll have continued support over the summer months and into the fall for the internet access through hotspots and through our Comcast program. Next slide, please. So overarching commitments, just very quickly, I want to highlight the youth, elevating youth voice. This is in my shop. I am so pleased to announce that we have launched our Youth Ambassador program. It was 20 students as part of that cohort. They're going to be working this spring to do foundational advocacy and leadership development with an intensive over the summer that will launch in partnership with our Be More Me group, our Be More Me clubs, and our student-led advocacy projects. One of the best highlights that we can talk about is our Youth Ambassador program. We're also working really diligently with Principal Dettinger on our student government plans. So students, stay tuned. Next school year, we'll have some plans laid out for how students and schools can enhance their student government programs at their schools. Next slide, please. And I already did the student government, so we can go on to the next slide, please. Thanks, Jenny. And then for family engagement, the parent cafes are, again, way that we're doing wellness with our families. We're trying to beef up our school family community councils. And we have our citywide FACE advisors, which I want to talk about just for a moment. We have a collection of community partners who have been working with us all the year to build an implementation plan for the policy that the board passed last May around family and community engagement. So we'll be happy and excited to bring that implementation plan to you in coming months. But we have had a collective of folks working on that plan together. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Davis for him to talk about professional learning for teachers and leaders.
Thanks, Chief Highcover. That's exactly right. I think one of the things I want to point out when you take a look at the professional development is that we've aligned it to our key strategies, and you can see it's aligned with our teachers and with our principals. We always need our administrators and our teachers to be hearing the same thing and to be working on the same strategies in service to students. Let's keep going. As we approach the summer months and get ready for the following school year, we have already began planning for what Leadership Institute, what next year's summer learning will look like, and Operations Institute, and then we have the CEO Institute leading right up until the following school year. Let's keep going. One of the key strategies, though, that I also want to point out with respect to professional development is our Opportunity Culture Initiative. And the main point here is we have some of our best teachers that are leading from their seat and leading teachers within their school. So whenever you have peers working with each other and hearing from their partners that are in the classroom with them, you can see some of the results. And the results speak for themselves with respect to some of our early literacy scores, and also just the positive engagement that our teachers have had within our 20 city schools that have opportunity culture. Let's keep going. And again, we're going to start talking about the key strategies that we've really been working on since last summer. You can see them from left to right, everything from school culture and climate all the way to expanded opportunities. We're going to go in depth with all 5 of these, but I think the main point is that they're all in service to our student learning plans. I just want to shout out our teachers for all the work they have done with the student learning plans, as it's been a new initiative. And in the end, right, it is about personalization and making sure we're giving students exactly what they need. It seems like a long time ago since we started in August or September. But if we remember, coming out of a lot of virtual learning from the previous year, we had to make this as personalized as possible. Let's keep going. The first key strategy is really around wellness, school culture, and climate. While we have the different domains at the bottom, we started off the year by making sure that schools focused on the domains that were important to them, but also relationship building, along with a high quality stakeholder experience. Throughout the year, though, we began to focus on 24 schools that have gotten additional coaching. Those are called our focus schools. And at the same time, we've made sure that we've gone into the schools and given feedback where needed. Let's keep going. Another aspect of school climate and culture is really around our advisory resources. Advisory has taken on a much bigger role this year. On the high school end, it's at least once a week. On the elementary end, it's every day and is usually called morning meeting. But we make sure that we've got aligned and relevant topics that our wholeness team has created with teachers, with some of our leaders, to make sure that our advisory champions get them, and then it meets the needs of students. Let's go. Another important point this year has been our student wellness support teams. It has been difficult to hire additional clinicians. We had every intention of doing that at the beginning of the year. And one of the things that we've had to do with respect to that was make sure that our student wellness support teams got up and running. This is something that had not occurred previously. Sure, there are social workers and psychologists, guidance counselors that have always worked hard for students, but we made sure that we had structures so that those folks could come together and figure out exactly what students to focus in on. A lot of this work has been led out of the Office of Special Education, and I think recently we have either or will present to the Maryland State Department of Education, because this is just a wonderful initiative that has started this year. Let's go. We've also had an additional focus on staff wellness, and what I want to particularly call out is our teachers. A lot of the feedback that I heard personally was we can see the initiatives that we're doing. We can see the student learning plans, but we just need some more time to work on our own or with our teammates on some of these initiatives and how the new year has really been different. And so we pivoted earlier in the year to provide additional half days throughout the school year. Sometimes teachers used them again for planning or finishing student learning plans, and at other times they used it for their own wellness. So again, giving our teachers just that additional flexibility has been a part of our wellness campaign. Additionally, our Office of Human Capital has done a lot of work with staff wellness. I don't really want to list all of these points here, but what I want to point out is a lot of these were not in place before the pandemic. Again, it is Baltimore City Public Schools working hard to pivot and provide more opportunities as we go through the pandemic. And I want to shout out our human capital team for being the lead on most of these, just to provide different opportunities for our staff, especially our school-based staff. Let's keep going. So let's go ahead and pivot to the expanded enrichment and academic opportunities. And I think we're going to go right to athletics. That's exactly right. We were able to reinstitute a lot of our athletics this year. We launched spring middle school competitions that you can see. But I know we're planning to do more into the next school year, but this year, or I should say next year's plans have really been augmented by our partners at Under Armour and the middle school sports landscape analysis that they have provided to us. They did a lot of work with us as important partners, and we're going to use that as we've created more middle school teams for next year. That's our goal, is to have more middle school teams, some in the same sports that you can see there, but in the end, we want as many students that want to be a part of sports, no matter if it's intramurals or if it's in clubs or if it is in clinics or if it's in competitions, to engage in sporting activities, because we know that, especially for the middle school child, that's going to keep them engaged, keep them active in a positive way. Let's keep going. And at this point, I'm going to pass it to our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Dabrowski.
Thanks so much, Chief Davis. So I'm going to move through some of our slides more quickly. We have the opportunity with the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee Board that meets regularly. We've been updating the board very frequently, and it's been wonderful to be able to dig into a lot of these topics. So I'm not going to go through each one of the slides. We've spoken quite a bit about our work and commitment on fine arts. We've been able to talk about that at some of our teaching and learning meetings, as well as in our budget. So we'll just keep on going. I'd like us actually to move to the slide, Dr. Wu, on dual enrollment, because we haven't been able to talk as much about that. So if you go to the next slide, this is a space where, again, we invested more funds to really allow more students to have that dual enrollment experience. And you can see by the numbers that if you build it, they will come. And I want to just give a huge shout out to our college and career readiness colleagues, Dr. Rachel Pfeiffer, Mavis Jackson, for the thoughtful, intentional work they've done to get these dual enrollment opportunities out to more schools for more students. And again, this access to more opportunities is part of our commitment with this work. Similarly, if we go to the next slide, I want to just take a moment to highlight our continued commitment to advanced placement. You can see that over the years, we continue to expand our offerings, the number of teachers that are trained, the number of students who are able to participate. So again, really proud of the work we're doing and the work we will continue to do in this area. And then on the next slide, the next space, we've been talking a bit about this recently. I just want to give it a quick shout out here, is our commitment to 8th grade algebra. And how, again, this expansion provided because we could hire another teacher to support our virtual work, and we're being able to hit more students to get them into that space of accessing algebra earlier in their career. So again, just a couple of places that I wanted to call out that we haven't spent as much time updating the public. And I will signal that while we have all of the slides here for everyone, when we move into the next section, which is around acceleration and personalized learning, we've talked quite a bit about this. So what I would like to call out in this particular section is on slide 43 about celebrating our growth and progress for our student learning plans. So I know you heard Chief Davis talk about that all of this work around acceleration and personalized learning came out through student learning plans. And I'm just really pleased to share that we're getting to that area of 80% of our students having a plan. We continue to work towards the end of the year to get that number up higher. I want to just acknowledge the lift that this has been for our teachers, our families, our students to do this work. It's the important work of academic recovery to know our students. So more work to come. You'll see more improvements next year as we continue to refine and strengthen the implementation. All right, so if we keep moving, we're going to actually go through and move on to the area of, let me see here, some of our work in virtual learning. So we're going to move us into the virtual learning space. That is slide 56 and 57. Again, all of these slides, we've talked quite a bit about our tutoring work, our personalized learning work, but we haven't been able to talk as much about some of our plans for virtual learning. We know that we lifted up a virtual learning program this year that has done really well with a very specific group of students who have been just thriving in that. So we wanted to just, again, shout out all of our virtual learning teachers, administrators at Charm City and Port that served over 1,300 students this year. Again, they were showing up. They had really strong attendance and real strong commitments to be engaged in our recovery efforts. So I wanted to highlight that. And on the next slide, just to again, share the things that are to come in our virtual learning. So again, we're excited that we're going to continue with our virtual learning program. We've made some modifications starting in grade 3 is where this program will start. And we will continue to really make sure that it's the right match for students to be in a space where they are learning in a virtual environment. So again, the application window has been out, and again, we should be in a space where we'll have some more updates around our enrollment in the coming weeks. So again, just a real opportunity that the pandemic provided for us to see what we can do in a virtual learning space. All right. And if we go into Reimagine time, I did want to shout out a couple of areas in our college and career readiness work. Again, we continue to think about all of the ways we're updating our facilities and making sure we've got our pathways as robust as we can for our career paths for students. And then I also want to make sure to call out the way we're thinking about academic recovery, lifting up that we tried something new this spring around Saturday school for students to go and earn those credits. We had over 650 students participating this spring. So again, a new innovative way to think about academic recovery. And again, I just want to shout out the work Mavis Jackson and her team have done to really move some of these academic spaces for our adolescents. It's really exciting to see. If we go to the next slide, we are jumping into graduation season. And one of the things that we experienced in the pandemic is an opportunity to centralize some of that work. And what we learned is that a lot of our schools really appreciated that centralized approach. And again, that coordination and coming together and providing a very thoughtful and elegant space for our young people to mark that important moment in their journey was really well received. So we're excited that we're going to continue with that centralized graduation. Again, huge kudos to the central office teams and the schools that work together to make that happen. All right, let's keep going. So extended learning, we've shared this before, but again, just a huge shout out of the number of programs that we lifted up this year and the impact that that has been having for our schools as we think about summer. So again, where we can give more opportunities for students to engage in the important academic recovery work, along with some of these exciting enrichment activities that we keep talking about. If we go to the next slide, I just want to sort of end right here to say that we will continue to have over 20 district-wide school programs, district programs, and partner-run programs. But on this slide, what we're highlighting is that we have 54 schools that are launching school-based programs. So again, servicing the students that they see throughout the school year and signaling almost an extended school year. So I'm really excited about that. And again, it's because of the R3 work that we could reimagine and continue to reimagine what learning and what enrichment can look like together in that summer space. And so with that, I know that I moved quickly through some of the slides, but I know many of my colleagues and many of the commissioners have seen much of those through different presentations, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief Dabrowski. I also want to thank Chief Davis and Chief Hike-Hubbard. I appreciate you walking us through, and now I will just turn it back over to Vice Chair McFadden to see if there are any questions from the board.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. Colleagues, any thoughts, any questions, any comments, any concerns? Commissioner, I saw Commissioner Sally first. Commissioner Reed, we'll start with Commissioner Sally. Go ahead.
I just would like to acknowledge just the tremendous amount of work that's gone into this plan in terms of thinking through the range of stakeholders and how best we're touching our scholars here in Baltimore City. So I just want to shout out that acknowledgement first today.
Hear, hear. Absolutely. I mean, this is not easy work. And those of us in education and community and engagement, you know, it's really important that we understand the collaborative effort that it takes to actually move work forward in an innovative way for our young people in our communities. I agree, Commissioner Sally. Commissioner Reed.
This is for Chief Dabrowski. I was pretty skeptical when we talked about the whole process of acceleration. But yes, the presentation you made for teaching and learning, you talked about the high dosage learning. Can you elaborate on that for the greater public, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Commissioner Reed, for the question. So when we think about high dosage tutoring and what we are seeing in our early look at the data is, so first and foremost, it is the frequency. So seeing students 3 times a week, ideally, sessions running between 15 and 30 minutes per session, depending on the age level. Attendance matters. When we know students are attending, we see the impact on our assessments that we're tracking throughout the year. We're also seeing in some of our homegrown work that we're doing right here that when we are super connected to our core curriculum and our tutors are using our core curriculum for the tutoring work, that's where we're seeing the impact on that grade level work that we talk about. So it's actually exciting emerging data. Now, what we do know is that we need partners in this work too. So to grow your own tutoring program requires time to get to scale. So our partners that we are working with, we are also trying to find ways that they can learn from our homegrown programs to help refine what they're doing. So I will say it has been a huge lift, a huge shout out to Mark Etienne and Jalima Alisea for the work they are doing in the Office of Teaching and Learning around that tutoring space. But some of the things we're learning is how often it happens, how long the session is, and that connection to our core set of materials, that seems to be where we're getting the traction.
Thank you. I don't want to dominate, but I have one more question. You and Ms. Britt talked about Algebra 1 as being one, the gateway, and two, the cohorts you have in terms of 8th graders right now. Can you talk about how vigorous that is and how important that is? Thank you.
Sure. No, absolutely. And so again, some of the work of the virtual algebra started before the pandemic, because what we were learning and understanding is that some of our smaller schools were not able to have the staffing in place to run the multiple sections of math needed in a middle school. And so by having someone in that virtual space who could teach in multiple settings, because again, it's all virtual, so you can have 9 different schools represented in your classroom, we're able to provide the access. And what we know is that by providing that access in 8th grade, it opens up the math pathways for high school. Again, we are also at the same time working to think about what does that mean for a 6th grade honors class, a 7th grade honors class, to again, prepare that 8th grader to be ready for algebra, and to provide more in-person opportunities as well at schools where we can staff up and have the math teacher on site. So we're doing things simultaneously, but the piece that we've learned in the pandemic is that our students who are in that virtual algebra program are doing quite well. And so if that is an opportunity to harness the power of virtual learning, that is a space that we want to continue to see. And again, by giving that 8th grade experience to more students, we set up more opportunities for that high school space of math learning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think those are all incredible points, Commissioner Reed. I appreciate you for highlighting those. And I will say that the level of tutoring and as what we call high dosage, that is not happening everywhere, right? It's not happening across the board in other school systems and just in general. So I think we have an opportunity to provide what our young people need, not just now, but this is also supporting how we move forward. And I think that City Schools is doing a great job in starting that process, Commissioner Reed. And then also, with consistency, right? Chief Dabrowski and Dr. Santelises will start to see even more traction and gains as long as we keep our hands to the plow. It's not like we do it right now because we're just coming out of a pandemic and then we throw everything away, right? We've got to be consistent in the way that we provide these additional supports to our young people to really see it translate over time. So I appreciate you highlighting that. Chair Emeritus.
You probably said what I was about to say, just very, much more eloquently, but it's been good to see the system really work as a lab, and that folks have the sense that it's okay to try some things and still be true to the core, so we know our students are receiving the information that they need. And I would encourage folks, if you really want to hear in-depth reports, to join Teaching and Learning Committee meetings at times, but please look at all of the tables and data that has been coming out as we've been going through the R3 program and initiative. So kudos again to everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chair Emeritus. Commissioner Griffin, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you so much. I have like 3 comments and 1 question. Commissioner Reed, I'm glad you did take some time to highlight and ask for more of a discussion around the Algebra 1 work and the tutoring work, because that was going to be one of the things that I asked to be lifted up. And it's so important that we understand that and all of the work that goes into putting those things into place. So I want to start by saying the work that has been done with this R3 approach has just grown in its ability to address the needs of our community. And one of those things that's being used are the surveys. And so I was excited to see the growth and trajectory of how we are aiming to reach students, families, parents, teachers, district staff, community members. Like, it is definitely a more holistic approach and well-rounded in thinking about who are we really targeting and whose voices are often left from the table when we make decisions, and we need to hear from them. So I'm glad to see this large uptick in numbers and these smart and audacious goals around reaching students and families and teachers and community members as well. So I want to give kudos for that. My other comment is around just seeing the growth and development and understanding where we started with our student wholeness teams and where we are now and where we plan to go. Because where we are right now is not where we're going to stop. And so I think that was Chief Davis who was lifting that up. I really, really, really appreciate seeing and hearing that narrative around our wholeness teams, how they are helping our students in schools, where we started, where we are now, and how we're moving forward, and how that's going to continue to impact outcomes for our students on a holistic level. So thank you for taking time to go into that. My question is around the Saturday schoolwork, because much like we have our high touch tutoring, we have the Algebra 1 work that's being done. And if we're thinking about different ways that we're extending and supporting students that either need support in credit recovery or extension learning, I'm really curious around hearing more about how that Saturday school work is being utilized by students, any outcomes that we're even noticing at this point, and how we're thinking about measuring for impact as we go into a new school year to best utilize that as a resource too.
Yep. So I can start by saying we just finished the session. I believe it was last weekend, or it might be this week, might be the last. So we will have the data. Oh, I see Mavis popping in. I knew Mavis would want to say something. Mavis, do you want to say some things?
Yes, Saturday school, that's my baby.
I know it is.
So, and just Saturday school was something that the district used to do many years ago, back when in the early days when I was a child. And so I knew it was something that was very valuable. We have 2 sessions left. And so what we have found is that the number of students that are recovering courses are really, or the courses where we had the most number of students are our classes that are traditionally 9th and 10th grade courses. So which means that a lot of our students who are historically repeaters, like our 9th and 10th grade repeaters, they are trying to remediate courses and trying to get on track. So I think this is also part of our goal to get students, to increase our promotion rates and also ultimately to increase our graduation rate. So that's just some of the early trend data. I mean, we didn't have very many seniors that were enrolled because a lot of our schools also had their school-based credit recovery programs. But definitely a lot of the students who would be classified as repeaters are in those courses. And, I'm there on many Saturdays, and you should see the students rushing in, trying to, get there. A lot of the site leads have commented that there are students who historically are never on time to school. They are on time for Saturday school because we set the tone around, our expectation and the fact that they can recover these credits in addition to what they're able to do at their school. So I think, and that's just some preliminary information. So hopefully in the next coming week, so we will end on May 14th. That is our last session, and grades will close that evening. And so hope to have some additional data after that.
Thank you so much, Mavis. That was just what I was looking for. And because I understand that as you're going through it, you'll notice trends. And then afterward, as you have time to really reflect and not only look at data, but look at the anecdotal, right? The qualitative and the quantitative of what happened. Because I too grew up when Saturday school was a thing here in Baltimore City. And it was a good thing. Kids loved going to Saturday school back then. I remember going quite a few times, and the atmosphere was just different. It was a Saturday, and so it felt different. And what I can almost guess will also come out of it is this extra layer of feeling a different type of care from the district, that you have folks taking time out on their Saturday to be with you too, to help you make sure that you're on track and they're there with you and care about you. So it's that extra layer, that emotional piece that I can almost guarantee is under there, and why they're also running in the doors, those extra relationships they get to build and extra community they get to have. And so kudos. And I'm so glad that it's your baby and that you brought it back and that it is running, and I'm happy to see it and look forward to seeing any more evolution of it.
Thank you.
Yep, this is Commissioner Brooks. Can I jump in? I want to say Chair Richardson. Vice Chair McFadden?
Sure, Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, so again, I think want to echo sort of the appreciation for the work and just an acknowledgement of the heavy lift that it takes that you all are doing. And I also want to name that I think sort of Dr. Dabrowski, as you were talking about Saturday school, I was like, oh, are we calling Saturday school innovation? When I was in middle school, elementary, middle school, that was something that we were already doing, that the district stopped doing. And so I entered there at that point because I think some of this, I know it's important to sort of set us up for doing things, but in some ways that sounds like going back to the basics. And so maybe I'm super excited that you have that and have gone back to the basics of our work around the things that we know already work for Baltimore City students and many students across this country, especially Black and Latinx students who have always asked for a different option than the traditional Monday through Friday school system. And so I just kind of wanted to sort of raise that. So a part of this is going back to what we know works. Tutoring, high dosage tutoring, is not new. It might be new to the district, but we know, folks in education, that there was always something that would accelerate growth. And so I named that again. So for me, I guess I'm having a response to, I think, the sort of the narrative. And I just kind of want to put it into perspective that we're just doing things that we knew have historically worked. And so that's my first comment. Now, so I'm on slide 48. I'm looking at the high dosage tutoring slide. I'm interested in figuring out sort of what specific data point beyond the student engagement measure do we have right now to indicate whether or not this is working?
Yep. So if we're looking at our internal, and first of all, let me just appreciate Commissioner Brooks, your push on the narrative. Appreciate where your sense of some of the things we've always known about good tutoring and the impact that can have on students. I will certainly acknowledge and appreciate that. And I think the space right now of being able to lift up Saturday school in this particular environment and to know that it had been a practice before and that we're bringing it back in service of this particular moment too. I appreciate the feedback on that and take that to heart. I will say in terms of what we're seeing right now is the space where we are looking at the internal model of tutoring that's been developed in-house, if you will, and the connection to that and the impact that we're seeing on some of our foundations monitoring and our DIBELS monitoring, and we're seeing the uptick. And so that's again, and this is where I was intentional on saying some promising pieces of data and the impact that it's making. And we believe that there are things happening behind the scenes, like that increased attendance, the close connection to our curriculum, the tutors actually being paraprofessionals that are employed by city schools in our schools every day. Some of those things we think, along with the ways in which our paraeducators are talking to our classroom teachers, there just seems to be a series of events that are coupled with this internal model, and then we're seeing the uptick in those data points. Again, we're in 2 of our networks trying this out, but the impact is positive, and we know that the attendance has been challenging in some of our other programs. So that's, I think, the space I was trying to name in terms of what we're seeing and how we're measuring it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Dabrowski. And so, do you have a sense of it sounds like there are some contextual things that make this look like it will be promising. But for the total number of students served, and I was trying to figure out what slide, I think I might have seen it on the slide, what is the total number of students served in our getting the high dosage? And I saw a piece about attendance around we know that attendance matters. So for the folks who are not attending regularly, what are the strategies are we using to one, discover why they might not be attending. And if you know sort of like some of those reasons, it would be lovely to hear those, and specifically the strategies that you're using to engage those folks.
Yep. So sure. So a couple of things I can say that we have been paying attention to. So one of the challenges with tutoring with outside providers that are virtual or online is some of the logistics around when that tutoring time comes up in the middle of a day, and there's a remembering of, oh my goodness, it's tutoring time, let's get students online. There's been some of those just logistics to work through. We've definitely are working closely with some of our partners that are online to help us through those things. We're also trying to figure out the right age group level for virtual, where before during the pandemic we were all virtual. Now that we are mainly back in person, we're trying to work through that. The other piece that we know is that if students are not in school, if they were out in quarantine, so we've had a lot of interrupted learning time at different points in the year because of some of the surges we've experienced. So some of that has impacted attendance in a number of our sites. So we know that those are things. So we're working on trying to troubleshoot that. We're also trying to help build better tracking systems so that we as a district can have a better dashboard to see some of the attendance, to alert, you know, a school leader may not realize that so-and-so has missed it. So we're just trying to help get tighter on this. I think part of what we're learning though is this is happening in all districts that are, we've been involved in a number of national conversations around tutoring. This has been one of the sort of pieces that are out there, is the logistics around where does tutoring fit in the day, so that you can get that attendance solid. So we are certainly working on that. But in terms of the participation, we have just over, let's see, 1,159 students who are involved in our pilot. And then in terms of
Oh, Dr. Dabrowski, if you're talking, I can't hear you anymore.
Her camera went off. We're just waiting for her to come back. There she is. Is it someone's device?
Can folks see me now?
Yes, Dr. Dabrowski, go ahead.
Yep. Sorry about that. No, so just to lift up that just over 1,100 students are involved in our homegrown model of tutoring. And we have, I believe, just over 12,000 students involved in our multiple programs and partners across the district.
Great, thank you. And do we have a sense of the breakdown just yet in terms of the outcomes for students who are in that concentrated, that 1,100 that you said?
We are. We're working on. Yep, we are working on that now with our Office of Achievement and Accountability. We are working closely with them to be able to know more of the impact using our end of year assessment. So we will have more as we continue to sort of track that.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I have one more question for Chief Davis. I'm looking at the wellness slide on 27. And so I'm curious, so I want to acknowledge that we are sort of making some pretty significant progress in terms of students having access to wellness support teams and so forth. There are a couple of things that have come up and come to my attention. One, sort of, again, I keep asking a question about sort of what sort of percentage of increased resources are we allocating to sort of mental health support services? And I still have not gotten that number just yet. But of this 5,000, almost 6,000 students being served, I see this number on slide 27. That's about like 7 or 8% of our total student population. So again, my question comes back again, is that a sufficient dosage? And given that we were talking about high levels of tutoring dosage is important, I'm interested to hear your thoughts and reflections on the dosage that will be required to scale to reach our students in terms of ensuring that they have access to high quality mental and emotional well-being supports in the district.
Chief Davis, you're muted.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Brooks. A couple of clarifying points. One is the expanded school behavior health clinicians are some of our partner organizations that come in and provide additional support. That goes above and beyond our Baltimore City Public School social workers, psychologists, guidance counselors that are also doing counseling and providing services. So I would just say that beyond our normal staff, that is kind of extra support that we have. And I just want to completely acknowledge that last year during this time and during the summer, we wanted to expand that work, and we wanted to hire additional mental health clinicians. And both our partners and ourselves have really just had a hard time with that. So I will always appreciate the push, Commissioner Brooks. I will just say that I and the team are always open to other ways to get mental health supports. We are figuring out if there are other opportunities with different organizations beyond ESBH. So we're trying to uncover any type of support that we have. You're asking if it's sufficient, and I just have to tell you, as a former teacher and principal in Baltimore City, I would want as much support for our students as possible, and I feel like we're always going to keep pushing for more. Like I said, we even wanted to expand the ESBH program, but our partners could not find additional clinicians as well. So I'm always open, and the team is always open to additional thoughts around this. And I just don't know if we can do enough when it comes to this, especially in a pandemic.
Great, thank you, Chief Davis. And so I guess I will end on this. And so one of the things is that I think there might be ways that we can improve already what we're doing. When we met with some of our students last week, it was clear that some schools actually may not be doing the SEL touches weekly or bi-weekly as they should. So I wonder if there are ways in which we can already just enhance what we have while we're also trying to build things new, because it sounded like there were still schools that were not doing what we had recommended from the district in terms of making sure that there are touch points, that students know that they have access to counselors, where to go to get that mental health support, and any other touch points that come with ensuring that SEL is embedded and integrated throughout our daily services. And so I just kind of want to raise that. So maybe it's like, what are we currently doing that we can ensure that we can increase the efficacy on to make sure that every student, so we don't have to sit at a ASCBC meeting and learn that students don't even know where their mental health support services are.
Yeah,
my final point.
Yeah, I completely agree. I will give you the example that I think touches on what you're saying, which is at the beginning of the year, we pushed our schools not only to form these teams, but to figure out the way to ensure that students that you just spoke to knew who their social worker was and knew who their psychologist was at the schools, and to go even farther with a family, so the families would know this. I'll point out Fort Worthington as the shining example of creating a video and sending it out to get to know who their clinicians are. But your point about it not being across the board, I would say is true. What we did is we lifted up Fort Worthington for all principals to see in the middle of the year, because we're just going to lift up our best practices around SEL, around our student wellness support teams, around making sure families know who they can go to if their child is struggling. So I use that example not to say we've got it locked down, but to say that I agree. And what we're doing is we're trying to reinforce the positive things that we're seeing in our city schools.
Great. Thank you, Chief Davis.
Thanks to the team. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. Appreciate the team working on this. I will now review the consent agenda. And to the members of our public who are with us tonight, I know that we have a few folks that have signed up for a live comment. I appreciate you all for bearing with us. Normally we begin at 6. We just had some additional time, and certainly this healthy presentation and meaningful conversation. So I appreciate your patience. We'll now review the consent agenda. Board colleagues, please let me know if you would like an item removed, and please state your question for staff. I'm pulling items 8.01, high quality instructional materials, health and physical education, and 8.03, waiver request for Baltimore Community Foundation, Baltimore Design Schools, so that our student commissioner, Commissioner Horowitz, can vote on them. I'll also pull I will pull item 8.04, the school year 22-23 fiscal budget, for a presentation and a vote. 8.02, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council number 67 and local number 44, tentative agreement. 12.02, AKJ, Education. 12.03, Pearson Assessments. 12.04, Goodhart, Wilcox Publisher. 12.05, Aquafenix Scientific Incorporated. 12.06, Active Learning. 12.07, Music Instrument Supplies and Materials. 12.08, Sphero Incorporated. 12.09, Associated Catholic Charities. 12.10, Springboard Collaborative. 12.11, Sanjay Productions, LLC. 14.01, Daily Computers.
I'd like to pull that.
Okay, Commissioner, lift that up. Color that in just for the staff.
That's, I just like to, somebody articulate, one, it's sizable in terms of amount, and two, just the gravity so parents would understand the need. Thank you.
Absolutely. So staff, we are pulling 14.01 Daily Computers for the reasons that Commissioner Reed just referenced. And we want to make that very clear to the public why that has been brought before us tonight. To parents specifically, as Commissioner Reed mentioned. 14.02, AT&T Mobility National Accounts, LLC. 16.01, Urban Teacher Center, Incorporated, Urban Teachers. 16.02, TNTP, Incorporated. 16.03, Teach for America.
This is Commissioner Griffin. I'd like to pull that one. I need to abstain from votes. So I want to be able to do a separate vote.
Absolutely. We are pulling 16.03 for a vote. 19.01, Mayor's Office of Employment Development. Thank you. We will now move to public comment. Speakers from recognized groups will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. I believe we do have Ms. Sheila Billups, who is live. Ms. Billups, are you with us? Representing the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, CCAC. Okay, we have Zach Taylor representing the Baltimore Teachers Union.
More partnership, they need more collaboration from district leaders. Good evening. As everyone here knows, the 21-22 school year has been extremely difficult for everyone. And given recent events, educators and support staff across the district are gravely concerned that these issues will continue and possibly worsen through the end of the year and into next year. Right now, the BTU is interacting with central office staff and individual school leaders on dozens of issues, all of which need more partnership. They need more collaboration from district leadership. These issues include a drastic increase in COVID transmissions, including COVID outbreaks within our schools, a lack of guidance or any clear criteria for when increased mitigation measures would occur and what transmission rates would lead to a change of practice for a given classroom, for a given school, or for the district at large. We need that information. And we're also working on air filters in classrooms that haven't been changed for months. We've seen dozens of these pictures across the school system, and they're essentially useless when they haven't had their filter changed. On top of COVID issues, we're facing other safety concerns for students and staff. Many high schools also recently faced a sudden haphazard change in school entry policies. Once again, this is an area where we need district leadership to work collaboratively with school staff, with the BTU, with parents, and with students to address needs rather than having unilateral measures taken with no planning, no input. They're being set up to fail. And we are again calling on the district to include the BTU in these conversations with the community, with district leadership, in working collaboratively on school safety, on issues like the code of conduct, and on issues of school entry procedures. When you work on these issues alone, gaps will continue and implementation will be fraught and potentially will fail. And the need for collaboration goes on. This year, teachers were required to engage in many brand new tasks and assignments without a single task being removed from our plate. We're exhausted and we're facing widespread burnout. And unlike many other school systems throughout Maryland, this additional work has not been accompanied with a COVID bonus or a retention bonus. The school system's complete rejection of a retention bonus has not been emphasized when the school system has talked about some of the retention issues that we're leading into next year. As a union, we've talked with over 1,000 educators, over 1,000, who are considering leaving city schools this year. And a retention bonus absolutely would help decrease attrition, especially while we're experiencing 9% inflation. We know that you are anticipating over 800 vacancies and perhaps many more than that. And we need district leaders to engage rather than dismiss our concerns here. Your staff is exhausted. Instead of redoubling on our core work, we've had a number of additional tasks like SLPs, the student learning plans being introduced. This is an area where we've talked with the district several times throughout the year, and it has led to some additional changes, such as wellness changes, and those we appreciate. But there's been some confusion around how wellness initiatives have been introduced, implemented, and it's been very inconsistent from school to school. And in these board meetings and in the updates, we just haven't heard that emphasized at all. Sometimes wellness has meant that staff are free to schedule doctor's appointments or engage in a non-work activity. But other times, wellness has meant work time that is merely reserved to be meeting free. But the focus then should be on completing an SLP or completing grades. And we even learn of a number of schools that are exempt from that. And it's just up to the individual principal to decide what they're doing with that time. This is really confusing, and it leads to a lot of anxiety because staff hear wellness and then they're like, well, my school has this type of wellness and my school has this type. My school, we don't have a meeting and we get to go home. My school, we have a meeting and we're just doing the same thing we're normally doing. All of this has led to a lot of confusion. And it's important to emphasize that meeting-free time is really important and necessary, but it's work. It's not wellness, it's work, and we just need to identify that as such. And there are dozens and dozens of other issues outside of our contract that need collaboration and attention. We need to be meeting with various city schools offices, not just labor relations to deal with grievances, but we need to work on safety, school curriculum, scheduling issues, transportation, evaluation policies. We represent 8,000 members. We're a lot more impactful than an individual hand-picked teacher advisory group. So we ask that you meet with us, you talk with us. We're facing a ton of issues right now. We're ready to collaborate, share ideas, and work to improve the district for all students and all staff. Thank you.
I'll now turn it over to the board executive, Mr. Gant, for public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair McFadden. First up, we have Aliza Zintelman commenting live. Aliza, I'm sorry I'm mispronouncing your name. Aliza, are you available?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm a new teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. I come from teaching for 11 years in Boston and in California in different sets of public and parochial schools. And I am just commenting about some of the issues that Zach just mentioned in his comment. Really, the thing that I've found pretty striking is the sub policy. As a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, we have a lot of responsibility, and the amount of times that teachers are pulled to be substitutes is alarming. And in all of the school districts I've worked in, I have never seen such a disregard for teachers' time in terms of subbing. And this is also including last year, where I know there's a nationwide sub shortage. My husband works in Howard County Public Schools. He has not experienced this. He's also worked in multiple other school districts. So with all these school districts, we haven't seen this. The thing that's most alarming is this definition of an emergency. I just picked a random email today. I saw that on May 2nd at 5:12 a.m., the person in charge of assigning subs pulled and had 5 teachers covering for a quote unquote emergency. So that's 5 teachers who lost their prep period that day without pay. The difference in all the other districts I've worked in is that teachers get paid for the time that they give outside of their normal required time. So if I sub during my 3rd period when I don't have class, I get compensated. The amount of teachers giving up time for quote unquote emergencies is extraordinary, and just makes me feel unprofessionalized, deprofessionalized. It makes me feel like I'm unable to count on that free time to do work. It makes me feel like the planning time I have is not important. And most importantly, it takes away from time that I could be using to communicate with students and parents in planning lessons. Additionally, it's just kind of weird that this is the policy, and it seems like there's inconsistencies from site to site. I work at Dunbar High School. This is what we experience at our site, but I think it's similar across the board. And I think just in coming as an outsider into this new district, that's been one of the things that I have found most frustrating and most indicative of some disrespect of teachers and viewing teachers like our time isn't valuable. Additionally, something I've noticed is that educational associates are pulled a lot for subbing, and that time is also important because those educational associates are supposed to be supporting new teachers and supporting teachers, and I haven't seen that support because it seems like they're basically task rabbits for the district. So I think it's just something that definitely needs to be addressed. I want to call attention to it. I'm excited to kind of, in my new role in Baltimore City Public Schools, start getting involved. And I guess that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comment. Next, we have Leanna Hauser, also commenting live. Leanna, are you available?
Yes, good evening, commissioners, Dr. Santalisa, and guests. My name is Leanna Hauser. I have been a proud Baltimore City resident for 23 years. I live in Canton, where my son has attended Hampstead Hill Academy for 6 years. I have served on HHA's Strong Schools Maryland team of 10, advocating for a world-class education system that works for all Maryland students for 5 years, the past 3 of which as a co-team leader. I have been committed to this fight for this long because I believe in public education. I believe that it must serve all students equitably across our city and state, and I believe it must be fully resourced to meet the diverse needs of all students. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future has the potential to provide this, but only if it is fully funded and the implementation is transparent and we are all held accountable for its outcomes. As board commissioners, you know that public education is funded through local, state, and federal shares. I'm here today to call on you, our esteemed board, to fight for funding that Baltimore City students and the supporting communities and stakeholders deserve. In 1984, the Maryland General Assembly codified into law a requirement for local governments to fund a minimum baseline amount toward public education. This is called maintenance of effort, or MOE. This remains state law to this day and can be found in Education Statute 5-235. Maintenance of effort funding is truly the basement floor of what a school system requires to function. This board understands the necessity and impact of every dollar that is dedicated to the education of our district students. As stakeholders in Baltimore City, our Strong Schools Maryland team is calling on you to recognize the power you have in shaping the opportunities our students have access to when school communities have the funding required for a world-class education for every student. We are calling on you to fight for the constitutional rights of our students to have access to the full funding of all elements of the blueprint and maintenance of effort. But that's not enough. Maintenance of effort is the floor, not the ceiling. Our students, educators, staff, and communities continue to go without resources they require, even when the maintenance of effort requirements are met. Education cannot continue to be shortchanged in our budget priorities, and it won't with your support. Students, teachers, school staff, parents, and the Baltimore community are counting on you to speak up and stand with stakeholders in demanding that our schools receive the funding they deserve to deliver a world-class education to every one of our students. And lastly, as it relates to accountability and transparency, I urge you to make the blueprint for Maryland's future and its implementation a standing agenda item for all board meetings, and to dedicate a page on the Baltimore City Schools website outlining implementation plan strategies, timeline, and progress. Thank you kindly for the opportunity to speak with you. I look forward to following your support on this issue.
Thank you very much for your comment and advocacy. Finally, we have Jocelyn Providence. Are you available?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello. My name is Jocelyn Providence, and I'm a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. There is an uptick right now. Factually speaking, we are in a rise in cases, in COVID cases, at a rate that has not been seen in the past 3 months. On March 14th, masks were made optional in school buildings. The positivity rate is now about triple what it was when that decision was made. Many people, like myself, have been asking for months what data will be used to make the decision to determine whether or not mask mandates will be re-implemented into school buildings. That question was never answered. And now, here we are, still in a pandemic, with multiple schools having outbreaks, and one of the most preventative measures that is strongly recommended by the Baltimore City Health Commissioner herself is not being implemented. The fear of violence and bodily harm has pushed the school district to spend millions of dollars in a short period of time to put metal detectors into every single high school. Many students and school staff have questioned how effective this decision will be, but that's a whole nother story. But why isn't the reaction the same when we are talking about COVID, a virus that can be deadly and also disable people, especially vulnerable populations? I hope that very soon, Baltimore City Public Schools will make the correct decision and re-implement the mask mandate, because not doing so is an act of violence on our students, school staff, and Baltimore community. Again, like I have also said previously, sick leave and supporting school staff with long COVID still needs to be addressed. I will give the same example that I've given before. When I put my body on the line in support of breaking up a fight in a school that I worked in, I was given permission leave and did not have to use my own sick days while I recovered. Any school staff member who gets long COVID after being in contact with a positive case at their school or classroom should not have to use their own sick days for the entirety of their long COVID recovery. School staff put their own health and body on the line and should not have to our school staff, students, families by reinstating the mask mandate and using permission leave instead of sick leave for the school staff who are recovering from long COVID. Finally, quick things I want to talk about since the presentation on the 3 R's. Or a question. One, is the model for tutoring is the model for tutoring that's being used access to the public? Can we look over it? I saw right now there's a high dosage tutoring happening, a pilot program happening in CLN 2 and CLN 3. What's the plan for next year? Will it be expanded? As a high school math teacher, I know a lot of students and families who would love to have access to tutoring, so it would be helpful for me to share information with them so that they can prepare and get additional support.
Your time is up. You can finish your last thought.
Okay, yep, this is my last 2 sentences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is involved with plan for strengthening and enhancing student government, as stated on slide 17 of the presentation? I would like to be involved as someone who is an SGA advisor. I would love to give feedback and help with the planning process to support scaling, equity, and impact as stated on the slide, especially since students next year will have the opportunity to vote on the Student School Board Commissioner. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening and stay safe.
Thank you. That concludes public comment, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Let's go to, excuse me, based on public comments, are there additional items any board members would like to pull from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve items 8.01, instructional materials, health and physical education, and 8.03, waiver requests, Baltimore Community Foundation and Baltimore Design School?
So moved, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Is there a second?
Second, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair Emeritus. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Chinya?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin? Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
I'm in favor. I want to go back for Commissioner Griffin. Are you in favor? It's 5 in favor with.
Yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Thank
first.
you. That's 6 in favor with 3 absent. The motion passes. We're going to go to item 14.01, daily computers for staff. Is staff available to speak to that item?
Yes, this is Chief Thomas Jones, Chief Information Technology Officer, and I can address that item.
Great. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. I believe the question was, just wanted to explain what they need for this increase to us. So, go ahead, Commissioner.
Hi, Chief. I guess one thing, it's $60 million, so that's pretty high. So I would think the parents, the families, and the public would like to know what's being spent for, but also the gravity of why we do this for the families. It's a lot of tablets. It's a lot of technology for education, that kind of thing.
Sure, thank you. So the reason that we're asking for this increase is that the current contract expires in roughly 2 weeks on May 26th. And as we know, we have been working very hard to do a one-to-one device strategy for all students, where every student have their own device that they can not only use in school, but that they have it at home to do homework. In addition to that, we also have to buy devices for the actual school itself, for those students who might forget or something might break or whatever, to ensure that we do not miss any of our testing deadlines. What we have experienced is that is very high rate of purchases. We have school systems now that have roughly $1 million worth of requests in, and we cannot possibly get it in that time frame. We do have a new contract that is, we anticipate will have 3 vendors on it that we expect to have ready by August 31st. But to cover the gap between May 26th and August 31st, it is necessary to expand the current contract in order to be sure that not only can we cover what's already in the pipeline, but we don't want to be coming back again in 3 weeks asking to raise it again. So we do realize it is significant, but we are working very hard to make sure that our students have the technology and our teachers have the technology that they need to give the kind of world-class education we're striving for.
And can you allude to how many laptops, how many hotspots, just so people can know how big it is?
Sure. We have close to 70,000. Oh, you mean have the purchase? I don't know the exact number of the purchase. We have a roughly 70,000 students, and the if you add that plus another 20% for the actual to have as emergency backup within the schools, that takes you up in the neighborhood of 85,000. We're only at about 77,000 right now. So we're steadily trying to build for the September 31st deadline, and the September 31st start of school. So I don't know the exact number that this amount would cover. I'd have to go back and have the staff do the math, but I know we have spent roughly this past quarter, we spent about maybe $6 million trying to catch up. Because remember, we started out with only 8,000 computers for the entire district. So we've been working very hard for the past 2 years to get them. On top of, we have to be very honest, we are dealing with students, and there is a breakage rate that we are trying to make sure that we account for as well.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda except for item 8.04, school year 22-23 fiscal budget, and 16.03, Teach for America?
So move, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Is there a second?
Second, Sally.
Thank you, Commissioner Sally. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Cheney?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
So this is for both of them together?
This is for everything except the budget
Except
and
those.
TFA.
Okay, couldn't hear you, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I'm in favor. That's 6 in favor with 3 absent. The motion passes. Is there a motion to approve item 16.03, Teach for America?
So move, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Was that a second, Commissioner Brooks?
Second. Yep.
Thank you. All in favor? Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Cheney?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
I'm abstaining.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I am in favor. That is 5 in favor with 1 abstention, 3 absent. That motion passes. We will now hear a presentation on item 8.04, school year 22-23 fiscal budget.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. This is Chris Doherty. May I begin?
Absolutely. Fire away.
Thank you. My name is Chris Doherty. I'm the head of the finance office, and I'm very happy to be presenting along with my colleagues the proposal for the FY23 budget, which will have a vote later this evening. As the board and the public probably, or the board knows and public members probably know, we have presented this topic in recent meetings, and we're very happy to present it here as well. I will take Dr. Santalisis's charge that we will endeavor to be succinct, partly because the board has seen these issues, and also to allow time for questions. And also, we kind of caught a bit of serendipity in the 3R discussion earlier, because the 3R work appropriately directly informed our FY23 budget. So perhaps some of the other comments where we focused on 3R, we can go over not as much in depth. I'm joined by Joan Dabrowski, the Chief Academic Officer, John Davis, the Chief of Schools, and my friend and colleague from the Finance Office, Acting Budget Director, Courtney Desabehi. So, like we do with all presentations, we point out how and where it aligns with board priorities, and because this is the all-encompassing budget for an entire year, it touches on all of the board's priorities. And again, just very briefly, when we bring a budget to the board for consideration. And when we work on developing the budget, which is a multi-month process with many stakeholders, it has both formal and informal parts. Essentially, we're trying to get at what our students need and what our communities want for their students and for their schools. So we try to not lose the forest for the trees, and this is meant to be a reflection of what our students want and what our communities both need and want. This has been a doozy of a year in preparing the FY23 budget. As we all know, a lot of moving parts, even by the standards of a big complex organization like ours. The R3 work, the bridge from the COVID period out of the COVID period has, along with the blueprint on which it's based, our overarching blueprint that existed before and continues to guide things, was informing this, as well as has been mentioned in other parts of tonight. FY23 is the first full year of the Kerwin reality, which is very meaningful, and we always look through an equity lens. And we reached out to to various communities for input on our FY23 budget. And I'll just say briefly on the next slide, Courtney, that we taken together, we have these pillars of what we know our students need, kind of as a starting point. They need safe and healthy in-person learning, individualized learning and support, et cetera. But when I say the et cetera, these are the themes that emanated from the 4 community forums that we had. They emanated from the 6,000 plus bits of feedback that we got. So these weren't plucked from the literature. They weren't plucked from a small focus group or even a handful of educators. These were the things that community members, schools, school leaders really hammered home. And that's what forms the priority areas of our budget going forward. So you'll see extended learning got the most feedback, mental health supports the second most, and then down on tutoring, school culture and climate, arts and enrichment and sports. But all of these were extremely stressed. So when you ask folks to give feedback or to rate things, often the order, it's very helpful to know the order, but it's not to say that the one that scored the lowest, the lowest was only slightly desired. These are the big 6, and these big 6 are what permeate our FY23 budget. And again, trying to keep it brief and not belabor, we have received, and we're in the process of receiving, some extraordinary one-time funding from the federal government. And we have discussed this at the board level and at subcommittees and other places. And of course, the money came through the prism of being safe during COVID and then emerging from COVID and being all the stronger after it. So we're in train of that. We will have such funding until the end of FY24. And as bountiful as it has been, it's always known that it's been one-time funding. So we continue to focus very directly on health and safety aspects of the COVID funding, but also getting to the 3R aspects of Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine. It's not just about staying safe and healthy in the school buildings, although at the beginning of the pandemic, that was certainly where tens of millions of dollars were being spent. And we're by no means out of the pandemic, but we are shifting funds as appropriate to instructional and other activities. Schools in our decentralized system have a lot of say on how they spend their money, and they've spent it in various ways. If you go back real quick, Courtney, sorry, the schools, for their part, they hire temporary employees, and then in one school they can do very different activities as opposed to the needs at a different school. Tutoring was a big recipient of funding, as well as various improvements to school culture and climate, and of course arts, sports, and enrichment activities. That was what an awful lot of schools focused on. Meanwhile, the district also did activities like renovating bathrooms in 26 schools, all part of that COVID funding. We're in the process of renovating health suites at 21 schools. Yes, they're helpful during a COVID environment, but every school deserves a proper health suite, COVID or no COVID. We significantly have been upgrading our HVAC systems, tens of millions of dollars there with the MERV filters and the standalone purifiers. Again, particularly good in a COVID environment, but good practice and good settings and facilities even once we emerge. And last thing is outdoor spaces. The funds that we received from the federal government and the push to come up with inviting, creative, and conducive outdoor learning environments was an immediate term goal because of COVID considerations, but every school benefits from increased attractive outdoor spaces, even on the sunniest day when no one's concerned about anything like COVID. These are funds well spent. That said, these are going to end in FY24, and we've known from the beginning that they're going to end in 24, and that's where Kerwin comes in. Unlike other states where they're talking about a cliff, where there's an increase in funding from the feds, but then it's going to go back to the status quo ante. In our case, because Kerwin is wonderfully, after so much work has been done in advocating for it, we won't go back to the status quo ante because we'll be receiving in FY23 and beyond significantly increased funds. In FY23, for example, in the order of over $200 million more dollars in funds for our schools and our kids than before. So we're pivoting, as people like to say, from the one-time only funds and trying to wring out every bit of value we can from those, and kind of deliberately turning to the Kerwin funding, which is ongoing funding. And now, and I'll really try to make up some time on these, Courtney, just to put a little bit of meat to the bones. The 3R aligned spending at the school level, these are just some actual line items pulled. You'll see that the bathrooms are 21 million, the tutoring is 13 million, and on down the line. And where things have been deemed effective and well received, that will also be a big part of FY23. This is a glimpse at the year that we're in, and you see numbers that correspond to some of the themes that we're talking about. But in FY23, you'll also see more continuity than non-continuity. The extended learning that people made so clear they thought was beneficial. Summer programming is one aspect of that extended learning. We're looking at $31.5 million. The tutoring that was well received, it was whatever the last slide said, 13. Now it's 25. We're still spending considerable funds on COVID testing, as Dr. Santalisa said in her remarks. That we're not taking our foot off the pedal there. We're doing our asymptomatic testing. We're doing contact tracing. We have health and safety coordinators in every building. So that's absolutely still going on. But we're doing several things at once, and not just hunkering down in a health and safety environment and not complementing it with other activities. If you can go to the next slide.
So the slide there, go back to the previous slide. Would you go back? It was a little blurry. The slide, didn't see the full slide.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McFadden. And also, just by way of seeing these actual numbers, as Chief Jones mentioned, we're not out of the technology one-to-one delivery either. We're spending money on technology. And one quick note for Commissioner Reed and also Chief Jones, although the number on that daily contract was 60 million, it was an increase from 56. So the new money that will bridge the gap that Chief Jones talked about from May 26th to August 31st, that's the $4 million increase. I know the top line number on the contract said 60 million, which is quite an eye popper, but the new money that you just approved, I think, is the increment of 4 million. I just thought I'd use my time to say that if it's helpful, and that dovetails with things like the technology, software licenses, and PPE. And here we're just saying that what we've been doing in these years of 22, 23 is getting ready for Kerwin, knowing that the COVID money is going to end, but also Kerwin puts money in the hands of the schools, a great deal more money in the hands of the schools. And so things that previously had been funded at the central level, and there were good reasons to have it be funded at the central level, as we turn into a school, even more school-centric funding environment, certain things will be shifted to the schools and to from Kerwin funds. Now, I'm now starting to see that cracking up there. One other thing I'll say on Kerwin, and we have we've had much discussion about Kerwin, and it's only going to increase. It's a wonderful place to be. As one of the public commenters said, it took a lot of work to get these significantly increased funding levels, and we're endeavoring to be as clear as we can about the funding, what it's going towards, and of course the tracking. And the state as well is putting in a whole host of requirements in addition to this significantly increased funding. There's all manner of reporting requirements, which we will of course satisfy, but that won't be the only way we communicate how we're doing with Kerwin. It'll be the compliance aspects, and of course an ongoing transparent approach to say how things are different, what's getting more funding, and the like. And one other aspect that I'll try to say, because I think this might be my last slide before I pass it over, but I will say, if I can, rather than jump in later, on the mental health supports that either Joan or John will talk about in a few minutes, Commissioner Brooks, I do want to quickly say that on the mental health supports, we did go back, and what we've seen on the spending from FY20 to FY23 is a 17% increase in our spending for mental health supports. Back in FY20, we were at about 42 million, and in FY23, we're 49 million and change. So that represents a 17% increase, again, from FY20 to FY23. At a recent meeting, I had thought that, I had speculated that that although the FY22 to FY23 bump is actually relatively modest, or 4%, it is partly due to the fact that we've been ramping up from FY20 through FY23. Also, as Chief Davis mentioned, we have a contract that I think the people who know more than I do are quite pleased with the expanded school behavioral health. And the funding for that contract, where we have a range of high quality providers who can bring resources to kids in a very speedy way, we've gone from 1.7 million in FY20 to 4.95 million in FY23. And that's, so as the board knows, we have at least one school psychologist in every building and at least one social worker in every building. And partly, I think we're running up into market-driven macroeconomic effects of having difficulty finding more people in that highly coveted roles. So rather than just say, oh, well, we've expanded by 187% our funding to the ESBH contract, which allows us to take advantage of organizations across the region who provide mental health supports as their primary function. So that doesn't preclude any discussion later, but I didn't want to jump in on my colleagues to hit those numbers if it would break their flow. So that's the succinct attempt at my portion of this, and I think I will turn to one of my colleagues, and it's Joan Dabrowski, a Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Dabrowski, thank you.
Thanks so much, Chief Doherty. So again, the items that Chief Doherty has already highlighted are represented here again on the successes that we're going to continue to build on. Let's go to the next slide. So as we've talked a lot about tutoring tonight, and I know the question was raised, like what's coming next for tutoring? We know we want to expand so more students at more grade levels and more content areas are supported. So I just want to echo some of the concerns raised earlier this evening. We're not there with where we want to be with tutoring. We've got more to do, more to learn, and more to grow. So this is our investment. Next slide. Extended learning, again, we've talked about this. We currently have just under 100. We want an extended learning program in all of our schools, so we will continue to invest in that. We want to continue to match it as well as we can to the instruction that's happened during the day, so it represents true extension of the school day, because we know that's where we see the impact. So excited to learn what we've been doing this year that's worked well and continue that investment so more students are supported. Next slide. Arts and enrichment. Again, we've been talking quite a bit about our commitment so that every student will have access to a fine arts experience in our schools. So we are working hard to invest in not just the recruitment of teachers, but the support for those teachers as we think about mentoring them so that they can be successful in our schools. And next slide, please. I spoke earlier this evening about our commitment in the dual language work and how that has really shown great promise for the number of students experiencing that. So we will continue to invest in our dual enrollment programming. And again, the pieces I've highlighted before, our commitment to supporting more graduates, our continued implementation of our CTE pathways, and our, again, expansion of not just our AP, but the pre-AP to help kids get ready for those highly, the courses that really require a level of advanced instruction. All right, and I believe I'm going to toss to Chief Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Dabrowski. If you take a look at the second point on this slide about mental health supports, it falls right in line with what Commissioner Brooks was asking about earlier. And I just want to call that out, right? Even though we did a lot of intentional work in the summer leading up to the fall, I think some of the feedback that Commissioner Brooks heard, I would agree with, and we should continue to increase that awareness so that every child and every family knows where to go to get support. You can see a slight uptick in the funding amount in mental health supports, but as Chief Doherty mentioned, if you really look from 2020 to 2023, it sounds like it's about a 17% increase, and we should just be really clear about that. Let's go to the next slide. Additionally, and again, I feel like this falls right in line with our R3 presentation where we talked about sports and athletics. We worked really hard to get as many students back into sports, but we were very broad in the way that we did it with respect to intramurals, clubs, clinics, along with additional sports teams where we could start them. We think we're going to do more, especially on the middle school end, and that's part of the funding increase that you can see here, and that's what we should be looking forward to next year. Let's keep going. When you take a look at the school culture and climate, the amount looks smaller, but what I want to point out is what Chief Doherty pointed out again around the money in Kerwin, a lot of it going to schools. And so where previously we had provided $10,000 per school to be intentional about school climate and culture, especially at the beginning of the year, especially if they were doing additional activities, especially if they were bringing in staff to work on planning for school culture and climate, where we did that from a central office perspective, that money is still there, but it's in schools. So when we have to report it, it actually looks a little bit lower. So I want to be completely clear about that. But there are more student wholeness related positions that we are creating. I think a couple of them are around really making sure we've got folks to knock out our advisory and morning meeting resources. And you can see the intensive coaching that we're going to provide to some supports that, again, aligns right with R3. And let's talk just a little bit about technology on the next slide, where we've just had to have an increase in our IT staff positions just to give more support. I know Chief Tommy Jones has worked hard with his team to go out to schools to make sure we're aligned with how many devices they have, making sure students have them as we've said across the district. So with this increased work that we're doing, along with the cybersecurity investments, there will be additional staff positions that we're investing in. Again, it's all about making sure that we get to having a school issued device for every child. And now I'm passing it back to our finance team, and Courtney is going to take it from here.
All right, good evening, everyone. Here we're looking at our funded enrollment over the last few years. The key thing to note is that we've been relatively flat for the last couple of years after a few years of consistent enrollment decrease. And this year we're funded on our average of the last 3 years enrollment instead of just a specific FY21 enrollment, which allowed us to be funded at a slightly higher number. On this slide, we're looking at revenue, and our revenue is split into 3 main categories: our general funds, which is our most flexible part of resources; our restricted funds, which are our grants like Title I, ESSER, et cetera; and our enterprise funds, which are reimbursed federal funds for food services. So this sums up the totals to our budget this year, which is about $1.62 billion. Funding sources for general fund. We had a slight update on this slide. There's a pot of dollars that we shifted from the City of Baltimore allocation to State of Maryland because we're constantly receiving updates as to how these allocations are coming in due to Kerwin, this being the first year. So we made that update here. The total is still the same. It hasn't changed our general fund amount of $1.36 billion. It's just shifting some of the allocations in between. On this slide, we're looking at the breakdown for our general funds as to the categories of how those funds are allocated and budgeted. Of note, so we have the biggest pot of dollars, which are the dollars controlled directly by principals of 74%. In addition to that, we have 13% that's school support budget essentially, which we're going to go through on the next slide. So taking the total amount of general funds that goes to schools either directly or indirectly at about 87%. The other items are non-distributable fringe, debt service, and essential office amounts, which make up the pie for general funds. For the centrally budgeted school supports I mentioned, this slide breaks down, some of the elements. So we have transportation, like our school bus and taxi contracts, out-of-county non-pop payments, athletics, contracts, mostly special ed contracts in the CAO office, so nursing, speech, pathology, etc. We have support in the COO office, so non-admin items like preventive maintenance, trash removal, building maintenance workers, our utility costs, so gas, electric, oil, water, etc. School police, and OTPS and IATD, which stands for, just non-personnel related items. So some of the WAN, LAN, wireless support, et cetera, that's in the ITD and home and hospital. This slide highlights a breakdown of our FTEs. So in FY23, the 976 or so FTEs in central office. And there'll also be an additional 524 who spend at least 80 to 100% of their time in schools. So just kind of emphasizing the previous 2 slides, showing that there's a strong amount or a significant amount of resources that are budgeted in central office that are really done on behalf of and in support of schools. It also breaks down by office, some of the significant amounts for those FTEs. Here we have the Kerwin allocation. This summarizes all of the Kerwin allocation, regardless of whether it's separated in general funds or restricted funds, and also combines, what's a state allocation and a local allocation. So this is the total Kerwin picture, and which comes up to about $1.42 billion. The majority of which is in what's called the foundation amount, which is the least restricted, pot of dollars. So this is, sort of the big picture of where we're receiving the money. And as we mentioned before in some of our Kerwin presentations, depending on which category the funding falls into, it can be used in different ways or has to be shared with different categories of students. Special education dollars, of course, are specifically for special education students. Pre-K dollars are specifically for pre-K students, and so forth. So there are restrictions based on the individual pots of funding. It's not just, a big, large, general fund, for lack of a better term, where the dollars can be allocated any way that we decide. This last slide is just a brief sort of summary or oversimplified summary of the allocation process, for schools. So the funds that we reference for revenue, the state and local amounts for Kerwin, we took the state, local, added them together to get the total amounts that we needed to calculate the per pupils. We identified the target populations for each program type. So what are the students or what's the enrollment for compensatory? What's the enrollment for foundation, for special ed, et cetera? And we use that to determine the total per pupil. So we divide the total revenue amount in that category by the total enrollment in that category to get a per pupil. And we allocated the 75% of revenue that needed to go directly to schools based on those targeted populations. And for the schools that met that threshold, there was still a number of funding streams that needed to be met. For example, the amount that we allocate for special ed, you can see on the previous slide here that we're receiving about 83 million, whereas we spend closer to 260, 270 million on special ed. So after we meet those minimum thresholds based on Kerwin, we're funding up to the necessary amounts that we need to sustain the programming that we have in schools and make sure the schools are receiving what they need for those programs, like special ed and pre-K. And yeah, I believe that is our last slide.
Thank you, Sadesibe, and to Chief Daugherty, Chief Dabrowski, everyone that presented this evening. To my board colleagues, I'm going to open it up for any questions or thoughts around the budget. Commissioner Sally.
Thank you so much. Two questions come to mind as I'm watching the budget presentation. I've had an opportunity to look at it several times now. I want to recognize the tremendous amount of work that it takes for each and every unit to contribute to building a very robust budget. We hear a lot about the aspirational goals of what is to come from what's built in there. I'm curious if you could give us a little bit more of a sense of some of the trade-offs that the system is having to make, recognizing that the resources are not finite and recognizing we're getting a lot more influx of funds from Kerwin, et cetera. However, there has to be some set of trade-offs that the system had to consider.
Thank you, Commissioner Sally. Again, this is Chris Daugherty from the Finance Office. I will happily share one, although it's not written on any of my notes, and so I on one part of me hates to go off script. The other part wants to answer your question fully. So I would say one that I experience, or one that I am noting, is a function of, and it's overwhelmingly a good news story, to be sure, the Kerwin, first full year of Kerwin, with about $200 million more in funding coming in. But because of the nature of Kerwin, which allocates funds by students at a particular school, and what types of students, what characteristics those students have, and that's the way the law is written. I will say, and it might be something that comes back in different manifestations to you and your fellow board members, is that money got pushed out to the schools as it was designed to do, and the central office is tightening its belt. I will say that we've always had a decentralized system, or at least in recent history. So and we're always quite keen to show what percentage of our overall budget is made up by central office staff, and it's in the neighborhood of 5 and 6%. So those are very good numbers from a fiscal responsibility point of view. But in a Kerwin environment, funds are being sent to the schools, and I think we at central office are going to have to learn how to learn how to support schools in that new environment, because we've always felt an appropriate pressure to get money to schools and to limit, to the extent practicable, spending at central. But Kerwin takes that and puts it into hyperspace, and so that's something that we're adjusting on. And there were echoes of it in some of what Chief Davis said and Chief Dabrowski said, which is, when there's valuable set of activities A or B, it could very well be that those set of activities used to be paid out of central, but now with the money going to schools, we're going to have to talk about having it be paid for by schools. And that's one of the growing pains, I think, that we'll have as schools and central office folks get our sea legs with Kerwin, is making sure that we maximize the dollars that go to the students and the schools, but meanwhile don't beggar some of the central functions that schools rely on to do certain jobs that they're just not built for. So that is a trade-off in my book that will have a ripple effect across many offices, frankly. And but again, the Kerwin is a very good news story, and it's built a certain way. We just hope we can maximize its aspirational intent as much as possible when we roll out the implementation collectively and with the schools. So that's quite a real one. And Courtney perhaps would like to grab the mic.
Chief Doherty, when Courtney, you can certainly go ahead, but I also have a perspective on this as well. But go ahead, Courtney.
I was just going to add a little to what Chief Doherty said. I think we've had a number of years where we've been behind in terms of where we need to be in spending at the school level. So Kerwin is allowing us to make up a little bit of that ground, but not all the way. And a lot of it is we're trying to make up right now. And on the instruction side, I think one of the areas that's still a trade-off is additional administrative support for school leaders and teachers who have a lot of duties in our system with regards to how they have to support schools. So I think that's still something that needs to be built on. The other aspect is support for small schools because of how the funding is allocated on a per pupil basis. A lot of it is really driven by enrollment. So schools that are relatively low in enrollment, we still don't have, the level of funding necessary to be able to bolster them as much as they need. So those are just the 2 points I was going to add in. Dr. Santelises, I'll turn it over to you.
No, thank you, Courtney. I appreciate your perspective. The other piece that I think that we are going to have to grapple with is that Kerwin dollars are categorical dollars. And so the extent to which, for example, the money coming for early childhood is a great example, and pre-K is very predetermined, right? It has an expansion focus as opposed to a deepening focus. And I think it's a great example of where we recently had, with, senior level folks, and we got together, and we know that our early childhood office does a fabulous job. The reality is, though, to expand number without being able to deploy the resources for deepening of quality is problematic. And to your point, I think has raised some flags for us in terms of how fast we expand and, frankly, how we give that feedback to the state and to the legislature when, namely Chief Perkins Cohen, Director Broom, Dewana, like others are working with the legislators. I think it's important for them to know what the implications of tightly prescribed funding actually mean, because it's not like, oh, it's just a windfall and it's in early learning, and so let's use it for whatever you need in early learning. Some of that is incredibly prescriptive. I think we've had the most flexibility, and Allison should certainly weigh in on this, when it comes to our concentration of poverty dollars, which fortunately for us, Dr. Kerwin got very early in the process, thankfully, and I will kind of give a shout out to Wall Street Academy and others who hosted Dr. Kerwin early in the process, because very early he became a champion for concentration of poverty dollars actually matter. And so we have some flexibility with those. But I think the categorical piece of this is going to be a big deal. The second piece, which I know Commissioner McFadden has surfaced in other areas, and I'll just kind of remind us of now, is the level of training and expertise that is going to be required at the school level to use these dollars exponentially. And I will just tell you, and it's through nobody's fault, right? Like, it came in late. We need runway to train people. But I will just tell you, my sampling of school budgets shows incredible variability with regards to the strategic deployment and use of those. We have schools and school teams and school leaders who were very quick to see how to use the dollars to expand opportunities for young people. And I think that the jury is still out on what it means to increase administrative support at the school level that is needed without going overboard. Like, do 7 APs equal a strategic investment, or perhaps 2 APs and 3 additional arts classes that will actually dampen the need, right, for kind of hallway monitoring because kids are engaged in stuff they want to do. And again, I don't think it's a fault finding exercise, but just that sampling from my vantage point of what school budgets look like shows incredible variability in the capacity of schools to be able to use those dollars wisely and with the support they need. And then third, I would say, we are looking, and I have to give, cabinet chiefs, executive directors credit, because one of the things that I saw more this year than I have in any other year sitting in this seat, and this is what happens when you're poor, right? Like when you're poor, you're just focused on, can we get through the school year? When you get money, you start asking questions like, well, wait a minute. And I'll use Janelle, right? Because she does a fabulous job in arts. She just got recognized. Well, the fact that a district that serves 78,000, 79,000 students had 1 coordinator of arts for the entire district, and because underfunding made us think that was okay. And the narrative of waste, right, that says every dollar is in this glut in central office, really covered up what we are seeing now. And what, frankly, central teams are doing is benchmarking themselves not against, how do we keep people from saying we're wasting, to benchmarking to districts like Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, and others, and saying, wait a minute, similar numbers and ratios are skewed. You have an arts department in Anne Arundel, last time I checked, I think it's 7 people to serve the entire district compared to what was 1 for us. When you look at, and you talk to Dr. Washington about the kind of building maintenance that Montgomery County has, which is like a building manager per building, that's not what she's building towards. She's trying to reduce the ratio so that it's not 1 to 50 buildings, let alone 1 to 1. And then I'll give you a third example is, given one of our media outlets' fixations with grading, well, let's talk about all the districts that give 1 registrar per school just to make sure that the scheduling is tight. And our folks, our team, our principals have for years been doing that, right, as part of everything they do. And so at some point, and this is the beauty personally of actually, I have worked and gone to school in well-heeled institutions. And I have served and taught in underfunded districts. And what I will tell you is there is a hidden cost to having to appear as if you don't really need what you know you do need. And you end up, and you can look at Jess Gardner's research if you want to, because she waxes prolific about this, that a lot of the things we get dinged on, when you look at the recently released OIGE report, what it shows is we actually are doing amazingly well, considering how understaffed we are with regards to central systems. So if you want me to really go off on it, like, we have been conditioned to believe that the under-resourcing of central is normal. Do we need to be more effective? Absolutely. And operations is a beautiful example of that. The tightening of those processes has made it a far higher performing area within our school district. But I will tell you, you sit down with Dr. Washington and her team, and she will not mince words using other districts as comparison around what the central support is. So that's just 3 areas that we are going to have to, and I would ask the board to really consider and contemplate how to grapple with what is a narrative of glut, of waste at central, and actually realize that we are the 2nd smallest school district central office in the state of Maryland. The 2nd smallest, and we serve 79,000 students. And so what that means is we get beat up for services not being there at the same time that there is the expectation that we operate at a much lower ratio. And so one of the repercussions is going to be, we're all going to have to grapple with, what is that acceptable level of support? And we can't just say anymore, Central's glutted and Central, because it's not true. Not when we're benchmarking, not to other school districts that people say run beautifully. Glut is not what this central office is. Now, if you've got a problem with a division that's not functioning well, that's one thing. We know from teachers, we have concerns about certification. We have one person in certification, one person. So I do think we're going to have to grapple with the complexity of scale and systems and what it means, the cost, the hidden cost of being under-resourced. Because the things that we ask our folks to do with no additional help is equivalent to, right, some of what we see when people are set up, they don't have, you know, the tools they need, and then they're blamed for not having it. So I just want to put those three areas for me, I would say, are repercussions, and it's important for folks to understand that this legislation is not finished. I'm thankful. Yes, I'm not going to look at, you know, gift horse in the mouth, but I will also tell you there are absolutely repercussions that this board and future boards will have to deal with long after I'm sitting in this seat. Because this is like 10 years worth of funding. And, you know, if you want a news flash, you know, and press is listening, no, I will not be here in 10 years. So that means someone is going to have to watch over what the implications are. Because like I said, we have operated under this glut piece that is just not true. It is not true. And in order to appear as if we are efficient, we have cut and cut and cut, and then want to know why nobody's there to pick up the call in the arts office. Because guess what? With one arts coordinator, you're not going to get somebody because she's out in schools. So if you can't tell, yeah, I'm a little passionate about that. This is not a cure-all, and we have to look at the underlying policies and how money gets doled out. And this money is categorical money.
I appreciate that, those additional insights and like that candor too. I think it's really important to make sure that like we're looking at it from what it is and what it's not too. I think there's a real unique opportunity to really step back and just double down on something both Commissioner McFadden said, and then also something I picked up in what you said, which is like the capacity building part of this too, right? Both at the school level, but also at the system level, as we're starting to understand how these dollars are programmed, what they can and cannot do, long-term and short-term, that I hope is really a real big part of the work kind of going forward. So I do appreciate that.
Was that
if
it?
There's,
Go ahead.
I'm happy to defer my second question. If there's more questions from my colleagues.
Go ahead, Commissioner Sally.
You know, I think one of the other things I really appreciate, as I've heard this several times now, is thinking about the role of stakeholder engagement. I think the system has done a tremendous amount to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. I'm curious, when we're looking at the variety of stakeholders that we have, you know, how has the system been able to balance or weigh the different competing needs of our stakeholders in terms of how we build our budget? So are we looking at student needs in one perspective, in one light, as the cross-cutting theme? And how are we weighing just the variety of perspectives that we're getting in order to kind of build a best-in-class budget? And I'm asking that question from a transparency perspective so that the public really fully understands where we're coming from in terms of how we arrive at these numbers. And that might be a Chief Doherty question.
It could be,
but I don't.
I just want to make sure that I understand the question as Chief Doherty comes. If he does understand better than I do, you can just wave your hands at me, Chief Doherty. I just want to make sure I understand the question. And did I hear correctly that the question is basically, how are we going to ensure that a variety of feedback is informing what the use of these funds are, and to be able to report out transparently to a variety of stakeholders how the actions and moves from the investment of these funds meets those variety of needs?
Yeah, well, let me put a finer point on it, which is like when we're looking at, we've got to sample a variety of stakeholders out there. How are we ensuring that one voice or several voices are weighted or not weighted in terms of how we develop our budgets?
In terms
It's complicated, and in terms of how we overall arrive at these budget numbers.
Great. Chief Doherty, you want to start first?
Yes, thank you. And then I imagine that the budget director, Desabayi, will also jump in. But actually, Commissioner Sally, I think one way we've attempted to address that fundamental question was manifested in a tweak or an adjustment that we made to how we gathered and incorporated feedback in the four, well, not just, but including the four big forums that we did in January and February. Previously, my understanding was that it was a lot more open-ended, or I mean, it was tell us your thoughts. And what was explained to me is one unintended consequence of a complete blank page was that folks could certainly go to some of those events and give feedback on something that could be extraordinarily micro, and it was their feedback, but then they might not have seen that feedback implemented, right? And then you could argue that you're worse off than if you hadn't asked the question, or you know, you raised expectations about certain things and then were unable to deliver. And what was different about this year's attempt was an earlier slide in this presentation was kind of meant to look like lots of different pieces. It was the R3 equity, community input, blueprint, Kerwin slide. And if we're not careful, then we have disparate outreach sessions and disparate plans for all those things. So someone won't be sure about, am I giving feedback to R3? Am I giving feedback to the blueprint? Am I giving feedback to Kerwin? So what we tried to do, and it wasn't done by finance, so I'm not tooting our own horn, is that people looked at the themes that were consistent to all of those areas of activity, and then they put forward for people to react to the kind of unifying themes. And then the reactions were to those themes. For example, the extended learning, the mental health support. So it was helping people focus where they would want to comment on yes, this, and more, no of that. I can't say we get lots of feedback, and we're, as painful as it is, there's always going to be feedback from various folks, from various groups that can't be implemented in the near term. And so we do own that there will be folks that make, you know, that they have one priority over another, and ultimately you have to divvy up the pie, and the money's going to go somewhere, and not everything can be a priority. So again, Courtney may have better details or a better point to make, but we tried to keep, in this year's effort, we tried to do some front end work prior to the four forums, where we didn't just show up and say, what do you think? There's always an opportunity for folks to say what they think, but we tried to organize exactly what those efforts were and then have people react to them, specifically so that we didn't seem like we took a bunch of input and then treated it in a capricious manner.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm going to add a little bit on what Chief Doherty said. So I appreciate that question a lot, because a few years ago, generally our feedback process with regards to the budget was, you know, here's the budget, you know, a couple weeks before the vote, and tell us what you think, and we vote on the budget. And it didn't offer folks a lot of time or opportunity to give feedback. It didn't offer folks a lot of insight, and it really didn't delineate the school level process from the central level process. So we've changed that over the last few years, this year kind of being, you know, the latest iteration, where we've done a few different things. So one, we've shifted the timeline for feedback to much earlier in the year. It's an ongoing thing, and it takes part, you know, or it's integrated into a number of our other processes. It's integrated into our R3, it's integrated into Blueprint and everything else. And we're trying to consolidate all the information and priorities and discussions from those different processes. The other thing is, with regards to the timeline, one of the restrictions was that, you know, it was hard for folks to give feedback, in the original format that we had because they didn't really know all the details of what's in the budget. So we started, in the fall, sort of educating people on how the budget process works, and also making sure they're aware of what the input opportunities are within the budget development cycle. So both for the district and the school level, for example, the school level, that you have three different, main points of engagement in terms of, you have your priority discussion in the fall, where before we even know what the enrollment is, before we even know what the numbers are at the school level, school leaders are engaging their communities to start thinking about what's important for their school, specifically looking at data with regards to their school plans, and taking that to their community members and getting feedback. They have a second touch point once they get their initial budget number. So before they actually develop their budget, where they're again engaging their school family councils, we provide guidance as to what that engagement should look like, how to record attendance, what the materials are that should be shared with the family councils, who should be attending, where they go through the details of the specific school allocation. This is what my school has. Here's how I'm planning on spending it. And then they have a third touch point again after they've done their budget, which they do in support with central office staff. And they go back to the community and say, well, here's what the update looks like. Here's what my budget looks like. And then we do something similar on the central office side with our, our district priority engagement, where we're showing here's what, has been presented, here's what we're thinking about. And as Chief Doherty mentioned, we've also made the switch over the last few years to make sure that we're not presenting things to folks that are disingenuous or can't be done. So, we make sure we tie it to the priorities. We tie it to things that we can actually implement within that fiscal year. We can actually put dollars behind so that there's, legitimate use of the feedback once it's received. And we try to show that in our budget presentations over the last few years too, when we show how the communities voted, and we tie it back to the elements that we're sort of funding or highlighting for funding within the budgets. So I guess the simplified version of the answer is we're trying to get as many different folks involved in the process. Even when we're doing our community engagement, we're making sure we're targeting different groups. We're looking at doing multilingual specific meetings. We do youth-oriented specific meetings. We do meetings with specific partners like PCAB, et cetera. So we're trying to target as many different groups as possible to get their feedback and incorporate it into the budget process.
Thank you, Courtney. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Any additional questions or thoughts? I move to approve item 8.04, school year 22-23 fiscal budget. Is there a second?
Second, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, Commissioner Brooks. Commissioner Chinyan.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts.
Yes.
Commissioner Sally.
Yes.
I'm in favor. Commissioner Brooks, are you with us?
Yeah.
Are you in favor?
I'm voting no. No, I'm voting no, given I believe the lack of sort of more dedicated mental health support services for our students. So my vote is a no.
Thank you. We have 6 in favor and 1 opposed. The motion passes with 2 absent. Thank you. Our notice of upcoming meetings, most of what was presented in committee teaching and learning, we heard again tonight. We heard a lot of that tonight, just woven into presentations, even in the budget. So thank you to all of our staff that is just working tirelessly for our young people. And certainly we have a ways to go. But together we're going to continue to move forward for the sake of our young people and our communities. There is a spring board parent and family forum on Thursday, May 12th at 6:00 p.m. here in the first floor boardroom. The operations committee will meet on Tuesday, May 17th at 10:30 a.m. The policy, it will be a virtual meeting. Policy committee will meet on Tuesday, May 17th at 3:30 p.m. virtually. There's a new charter applicant work session also scheduled for Tuesday, May 17th at 6 p.m. It is a virtual meeting. We will meet again for exec session on Tuesday, May 24th at 3 p.m. here in the first floor boardroom. And our next public board meeting will occur on Tuesday, May 24th at 5 p.m. The Teaching and Learning Committee will meet on Tuesday, June 7th at 3:30 p.m. I want to take another moment just to celebrate our Teacher of the Year. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that name right, Ms. Beryl Dudney, who is our 2022 Teacher of the Year. Congratulations to you and all of our finalists. It takes a lot of work to become even a finalist here in city schools with all of the folks that are working hard for our young people. So shout out to all of our finalists, to all of the Teachers of the Year at all of our schools, but certainly to our 2022 teacher. Congratulations again. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Chinya.
Thank you, Chair Emeritus. Is there a second?
Second, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. All those in favor, please answer by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.